Next, I'm going to bring up Commissioner Quarles with the Department of Agriculture. He's going to talk about some of the exciting things that they're doing, some things that we're doing together, and I'll be back up after that.
Well, good morning. Kentucky, what comes to mind? We're the home of bluegrass music, Chevrolet Corvettes, F-150s, Toyota Camrys, the home of Louisville Slugger baseball bats, and so many other different things. Kentucky is also home to my favorite manufactured agriculture product, distilled corn, otherwise known as bourbon. The eyes of the world just descended upon Kentucky just this past Saturday for the fastest and greatest 2 minutes in sports, something that no other place can replicate and something that ties every Kentuckian together, even if it's a little bit wet. Kentucky is also home to many famous celebrities. We're the home of George Clooney, Johnny Depp, Jennifer Lawrence, so on and so on. But who is the most famous Kentuckian? If you're to go around the world, chances are it's Colonel Sanders that comes to mind when people think of Kentucky. Kentucky is also home of some famous athletes, not all of whom are human. We're the home of American Pharoah, and just this past weekend, another Kentucky-bred horse ran for the Roses and won through some soggy conditions with Justify. We're also the home of Muhammad Ali, someone that the world knows, someone that was so dominant in his sport that he's simply known as the greatest. So why am I telling you this? Most Kentuckians know these facts. But when Vivek and the governor and the rest of us in Frankfort travel the world or other states, that's the identity of Kentucky. The identity of Kentucky surrounds our accomplishments, our heritage, many of which intersect with agriculture. Just think about it. Bourbon, agricultural product. Horses, agricultural product. Tobacco, agricultural product. These are the things that give Kentucky an identity, and even, yes, Kentucky Fried Chicken, agricultural product. And so we started talking a couple years ago with Cam about how we need to harness two of Kentucky's greatest industries, manufacturing and agriculture. In many ways, we're already intersecting already. We're doing it great. But I think the fact that we have two industries that other states can only envy right here in our home state, we need to be interacting a little bit more. And we have an opportunity for you to join in on that conversation, which I'll explain a little bit more here in a second. But just as Vivek talked about the strength of our manufacturing sector, agriculture in Kentucky is very strong, especially compared to other states. We consistently fight above our weight class. We have 76,000 farms in our state. That's a lot. Most of them are small. They're small acreage. I grew up on one of those just a few miles up the road in Georgetown. Grew up on a tobacco and cattle farm. I'm the 9th generation of my family to be farming in Kentucky. A lot of Kentuckians can trace their heritage back to an agricultural past. Well, 95% of those farms, or businesses I should say, are owned and operated by families. That's something that really sets us apart from other people in other states, especially those I states in the Midwest. And when you add up the economic activity of those farms, we bring in nearly $6 billion into the back pockets of Kentucky farmers each and every year. But when you look at the economic impact of agriculture, when you add up the food jobs, the manufacturing jobs, all the way down to our grocery stores, it's 200,000 workers in our state, and we have an economic impact of over $45 billion. So when you see the GDP of Kentucky at $205 billion, you can see that agriculture already makes up a strong component of Kentucky's economy. It's important that we tell this story, because if you were to ask me, what are the two biggest issues in agriculture today? Number one, I would say low commodity prices. We're experiencing a contraction in the market. It's tough. It's going to be a tough production year for us. Last year, fortunately, we had a great production year. We were able to grow our way out of it. But number two is that people don't know what we do. We are so good at our job, where 1% of the population feeds the rest of Kentucky, feeds the rest of America, and exports $140 billion worth of raw material each year in food. When you have 1% of the population growing and feeding the world, a lot of folks forget who we are. And let me tell you why that's important. A recent Washington Post story last summer revealed some startling statistics about agriculture. When asked, 16 million Americans honestly think that chocolate milk comes from the brown cows and white milk comes from the white ones. And 40% of American school children don't know that cheese is a dairy product, or that beef and hamburger is actually beef. Those are the reasons why we need to be talking a little bit more. And if you look at my personal story, I grew up on a family farm in Georgetown. And I was fortunate that every morning the sun rose over this little company called Toyota. And of course, as a kid, I thought every hometown had a Toyota in their backyard. And it wasn't until later in life I realized how fortunate we are to be a hub of manufacturing, that we're the third largest automobile producing state in America. But I grew up in 4-H, I grew up in FFA, even shoveled cow manure, which was one of the first jobs on my family farm, which prepared me well for politics in Kentucky. I was a legislator for 5 years, and I'm glad that you talked about the importance of reviewing education. I was happy to get $22 million in the budget years ago to help build advanced manufacturing campus for BCTC, something that really is a model for the rest of the country, that we need to be reminding young people that you can make a good living working in manufacturing, particularly in a state like Kentucky where it's going to continue to grow. And in agriculture, we're already dependent upon the manufacturing community. I just toured Gator-made trailers last week down in Somerset. You see their trailers all over America, made right here and manufactured in Kentucky. The ag economy is dependent upon this. Even farm-all tractors used to be manufactured in Louisville. So we have a rich history of this that we can continue to share. But in Kentucky, we're not just good at growing crops and raising livestock, we're also good at transforming that raw material and manufacturing it or processing it into an intermediate or final product. And just out of curiosity, raise your hand if you've ever had a biscuit from McDonald's. I think there's some liars out there. I think just about everybody has had a biscuit from McDonald's. If you've had a biscuit from McDonald's anywhere in the East Coast of the United States, that biscuit came from Kentucky. If you've ever ordered sausage from any of Cracker Barrel in the United States, any of the 647 locations, that sausage came from Kentucky. We're also good at manufacturing and processing products that we don't even grow here. The world's largest peanut butter processing plant in the world is located right here in Lexington. It's a Jif plant. These are the amazing agriculture stats that a lot of folks don't really realize, but we are part of the economy. And if you look at the role that agriculture plays in the national economy, we're responsible for 20% of all jobs and $6.7 trillion of our $19 or so trillion GDP at the national level. So it's time for us to help clear up those misperceptions about agriculture and start embracing us as an industry, as a co-equal in this state. And that's why I'm so excited to announce our second year of a series of land meetings being sponsored through the Department of Agriculture and also the Kentucky Association of Manufacturers. Land meetings stand for Linking Agriculture for Networking and Development. Last year, we had 3 meetings across the state. We're going to do that again. We'll have one in Owensville, Shelbyville, and Princeton. This is an opportunity to have featured speakers to talk about the opportunities between the manufacturing sector and the agriculture sector. And in case you didn't need another incentive, a Kentucky Proud Lunch will be provided at each one of these meetings, so please come hungry. It's important to realize that agriculture and manufacturing share a lot of commonalities. We're dependent upon the fact that Kentucky is a distribution state. It's not a coincidence that the same reason why agriculture companies locate here is the same reason why manufacturers locate in Kentucky. We're dependent upon low energy rates. The fact that we're within 1 day's drive of 2/3 of the U.S. population. The fact that we have a hardworking workforce and one where we're continuing to align educational outcomes with our manufacturing and agricultural needs. It's also important that just like manufacturing, agriculture is dependent upon trade. We're heavily dependent upon trade. Right now, you're seeing a flurry of planting across the state, a little bit late due to a soggy spring. But 1 out of every 4 rows of corn that you see in Kentucky ends up overseas. Half of our soybeans ends up overseas. 80% of the $350 million worth of tobacco that Kentucky still grows, a top 5 commodity for us, ends up overseas. And so when we talk about tariffs and proposed tariffs, I know there's a lot of concern in the manufacturing sector about the cost of inputs. Well, we have those same sort of issues in agriculture as well. So we're closely watching NAFTA. I talk with Ambassador Kelly Craft on a regular basis about the progress of NAFTA 2.0. There'll be talks next week in Washington, D.C., and I think that it appears we have a clear path forward and reaching some commonality on some of the dairy issues that Canadians have and our policies as well. It's also important to realize that if this administration decides to talk TPP 11 Again, agriculture can benefit from that. But it's also important to realize that as you all understand the dependence on tariffs and trade and input costs, so do we in the agricultural community as well. So we're going to stay tuned, and we're going to be proactive about it. Just next month, we're going to be leading a trade mission to Canada, the first ever from the Department of Agriculture, because 20% of all of Kentucky's agricultural exports go north. And it's kind of like a bourbon pipeline north, and they send their Canadian products back down. And so we're going to help strengthen those relationships, and we hope to have a great a yield from that. At the Department of Agriculture, we're also trying to innovate. Kentucky has a rich history of agriculture innovation. Kentucky has a reputation internationally for helping invent new standards. Just a few years ago, when there was an Ebola outbreak in West Africa, it was a Kentucky agriculture company in Owensboro that invented a vaccine that helped save American lives and those suffering from Ebola. And guess what plant that they used? The unlikely plant, a tobacco plant. Innovation. It was in western Kentucky that about 50 years ago, no-till corn, a pro-conservation tillage technique, was invented by Kentuckians, has been replicated around the world. It was Kentucky's conservation programs that were replicated, that when President Roosevelt was tired of soil from the Midwest landing on the White House or the Great Dust Bowl, it was the conservation practices from Kentucky which were replicated in the panhandle of Oklahoma and Texas to help keep soil where it needs to stay at. We have a strong history, and with 5 colleges and universities that have agriculture programs, it's the innovation here in Kentucky that will continue to keep us on the cutting edge. And because of that, we're able to do some pretty cool things here that other states can't do. Because we have so many farms, 76,000, small acreage, a decline in the tobacco market, it has forced our farmers to become innovative. And because of that, we have a lot of diversity and a lot of variety. We grow everything from apples to zucchinis and everything in between. And most recently, you've probably heard of some of the research that our department continues to conduct. Canaf, a fibrous plant that is already being utilized by some automotive companies right now. We're growing in eastern Kentucky. We're also connecting our craft breweries with hop producers. You know, Kentucky used to be a big hop producing state before Prohibition put us out of business. And right now, we're experiencing an explosive growth in beer manufacturing. And so we're going to try to connect our farmers with an existing market. In 1980, there were only 50 craft breweries in the United States. Now there's over 6,000. So we're going to help link that. And of course, as the bourbon industry continues to grow, we want to help connect those bourbon distilleries with Kentucky farmers. When I took over a couple years ago, we sat down with the other KDA, the Kentucky Distillers Association, and asked them a simple question. How much Kentucky corn is going into Kentucky bourbon? Well, only about 40%. And so the past 2 years, we have literally connected our distilleries with Kentucky farmers. And as we liquefy 15 to 20 million bushels of corn in the golden amber, I'm proud to say that the amount of Kentucky corn going to Kentucky bourbon is up 65% in the past 2 years. And chances are, when you fill up your tank with gas, you may not know this, but 10% of that is corn. And chances are it's probably produced by Mick Henderson down in Hopkinsville with the elevator. That we also have a thriving ethanol production plant in western Kentucky as well. But perhaps the crop that's getting the most attention right now is industrial hemp. And Kentucky continues to be the leading edge of bringing this old crop that connects Kentucky's past to our future. A crop that my great-grandfather grew on the banks of the Kentucky River to help support the U.S. Navy during World War II as my grandfather was fighting in Guadalcanal. A crop that once thrived here, a crop that Henry Clay grew himself. And 75% of all the hemp produced in the United States in 1910 came within a 9-county radius of Lexington. And in fact, we brought some hemp here. If you want to grab a bag just so you all can see it, check out our booth. This is legal. This is the fiber portion of the plant. And later today, we're going to be having a conversation with the nearly 400 automotive input and suppliers, manufacturers in our state about using this fiber, a lightweight natural fiber, a green input, into automotive parts. We already know that it has great potential. Fibers have been sent to Tesla already. And we know that this has a lot of potential when it comes to manufacturing. A house was built here in Lexington this last summer using hempcrete. a form of concrete that's been around for thousands of years. We're also looking at it for not just textile use, but also the seed use when it comes to the oils in the plant. There are some people making healthcare products out of this. Obviously, you can go to a grocery store today and buy the seeds. And we're also looking at the floral material of the plant to produce CBD oil, which appears to have some medical benefits. This is all on the horizon. And with Senator McConnell introducing legislation that he announced in my office just a few weeks ago in the United States Senate, we need to be prepared that industrial hemp will be a legal crop in the near future, and we need to make sure that Kentucky will be the epicenter of investment. And we know that's going to happen. Just last year alone, we had over $25 million worth of investment geared towards industrial hemp in our state. We had 85 full-time jobs created just in industrial hemp last year, and we sold over $17 million worth of product. There's a company right here in central Kentucky that's hired 15 people since January 1st, full-time employees in industrial hemp. So let's have a conversation about using this plant and growing car parts and growing inputs for our manufacturing facilities. It's also important to realize that just like manufacturing, agriculture depends on infrastructure. It's important that our roads are in good shape, that our waterways are open for business, and that we have access to broadband internet in the future. That's why I was happy to meet with President Trump in the White House just a couple months ago to talk about the potential of state block grants in the new infrastructure bill. And with Secretary Chow, Kentuckian, in Washington, D.C., I hope that we can capture at least some of this investment to help improve our infrastructure, because we need to make sure that Kentucky is open for business. And in conclusion, the Department of Agriculture takes a lot of pride in promoting what's best about our industry. You're probably familiar, although you may not be able to see this, with Kentucky Proud. We're fortunate that in Kentucky, we have perhaps the strongest state branding program in the country. Other states look toward Kentucky when it comes to help developing a logo that means, hey, if you see Kentucky Proud on a piece of food or a craft, you know that you're benefiting a local farmer or local agribusiness. We have over 7,000 members in Kentucky Proud right now. We sell over $500 million worth of products underneath that banner. And it's important to realize that we can use Kentucky Proud through an associate status to help promote manufacturers as well. So please visit my team at Department of Agriculture, our booth during the trade show, to talk about whether or not you can benefit from Kentucky Proud as well. And oh, by the way, if you're hungry, for the first time in a big way, you can buy 100% Kentucky Proud beef in 85 Kroger stores across our state right now. Last month, we're excited to conclude almost 2 years worth of negotiations with Kroger, our cattle manufacturers, a processor in Eastern Kentucky called the Chop Shop and Creation Gardens, to help deliver a great product that tastes great. And we're going to continue to march forward with putting Kentucky agriculture into our grocery stores. And I'm going to leave you with a challenge. Pierce Lyons was a big influence on my life. We're sad to see him go. But his family's been very generous to me. And just this past week, shared an all-tech brew with Dr. Mark Lyons, Pierce's son, who heads up perhaps one of the best-known secrets in Kentucky, All-Tech, a company that has a truly global presence in 130 countries. And we started a conversation about why Kentucky should be the ag tech hub of the United States. Right now, one simply does not exist. When you think of electronics and software, of course, Silicon Valley comes to mind. And for each different hub of industry, there exists one. But in agriculture, one doesn't exist in the United States. Why not Kentucky? We have the history of innovation. We have large and small agriculture companies here. We have venture capitalists who specialize in ag startups based in Louisville right now. And with the world population expected to exceed 9 billion people from the current population of 7.3 billion by year 2050, we need to double the amount of food we produce with less resources and less labor than ever before. The challenges are great, but I think if we position ourselves, Kentucky can become the ag tech innovations capital of the United States. And who knows, maybe we can have some manufacturing spin-offs from that as well. So in conclusion, I want to say it's an honor to be here today. Please talk to our staff. and those at CAM about participating in our 3 regional land conferences. If you're a Department of Agriculture employee, would you please raise your hand? These are the folks that you can meet with today. And if you want to get in on the action with industrial hemp with your company, please talk to us as well. So if you like to eat like I do, thank a Kentucky farmer, and if you're going to buy Kentucky proud. Thank you very much.